La réunion ouverte à 7h04. Bienvenue aux membres du conseil, chef de département, Mme la greffière, Mme Julie. Vous pouvez vous avancer tout le monde, là. Fait que, je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez bien en arrière, mais vous pouvez vous approcher. On va passer tout de suite à l'ordre du jour. J'ai besoin d'un proposeur et d'un appuyeur. M. Villot, M. Lamarche, tous en faveur. C'est adopté. On va passer maintenant à la divulgation d'intérêt pécuniaire. Est-ce qu'il y en a? Aucune. Fait que maintenant, on va passer au projet de l'item 4 et au projet d'expansion. Je vais mettre mes lunettes, ça va aider. D'expansion de la lagune de Plantagenet. Je pense que je vais passer la parole à M. Potvin. Oui. Allez-y.
Merci, M. le maire. Simon, tu as besoin du volume pour l'enregistrement, c'est ça? OK. Donc, on va prendre le micro, même si on n'est pas excessivement nombreux. Donc, peut-être quelques petites notes avant de débuter. Simon a mentionné, là, si vous voulez bien mettre vos téléphones en sourdine. Le but de la rencontre ce soir, vraiment, c'est que le conseil puisse prendre connaissance de vos points de vue. Should we do this bilingual? Do you prefer? Doesn't matter. We'll go bilingual. Our slides are mostly bilingual, and we're going to go back and forth between French and English. So, this is a special meeting of council, but there's no decision that's going to be made by council this evening. They're really here to listen to your concerns and see whatever feedback you have to share. There's been a few propositions in front of council as of late. C'est Joe, ça, je pense. Joe, welcome. Danny, good to see you both. We're just starting. We're just getting...
Michel, we want to make sure that qu'on entend bien, nous autres.
Vous entendez?
OK. Vous êtes correct, là, tout le monde?
Est-ce que vous entendez mieux?
Oui, c'est mieux ça.
OK. So, as I was saying, we're gonna use this bilingual, going back and forth. Our slides are mostly bilingual, and the purpose of this meeting, for your benefit, Danny and Joe, is simply to have council listen to your concerns and your vision and your point of view regarding the expansion of the lagoon. I might as well just jump into the presentation. Est-ce que tu vas aller à la table des matières? This is what we're going to be talking about this evening. So a quick chronology of events. Je vais parler de ça. Ça va être très rapide. Ça va être un survol. Many of you were at the meeting at PICOM in February, so I'm not going to repeat and go over all the slides and details. Just do a quick overview. Ensuite, on va parler de démographie et de zonage. Donc, l'option privilégiée qui a été retenue pour l'expansion de la lagune. And something that's of concern, obviously, to all of you, the financial plan. And we'll have a few conclusions at the end, and we'll talk about next steps. So, as I mentioned at our last meeting, I'm going to go very, very quickly over this, but the lagoon is over 50 years old. It was built in 1974 by the province and handed over to the township. And we've known since 1988, so some 37 years, que le système opère au-delà de sa capacité nominale. Et en 2021, on a commencé une conversation avec le conseil à savoir qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec la lagune de Plantagenet. En fait, le premier rapport en 2021, c'est un rapport sur l'état de l'infrastructure critique qui regardait à tous nos core assets dans le village. Et à ce moment-là, on avait recommandé un moratoire au conseil, essentiellement d'arrêter la construction. Je sais que ce n'est pas populaire, mais compte tenu de la situation et de l'état de la lagune, c'est la recommandation que nous avions faite en 2021. Et depuis 2022, l'administration travaille avec la firme d'ingénierie J.L. Richards à la préparation de l'étude environnementale en vue de l'expansion de la lagune. Donc, des développements plus récents Le 4 mars, on a apporté un autre rapport au Conseil. And this report on March 4th requested from Council that a moratorium be imposed for 12 months on any new development in Plantagenet so we can, I guess, have a plan so we can move forward with a full-time solution or permanent solution. And at that meeting, Council instead decided to allow 100 more connections in the system and also provided a directive to the administration that we come back with a proposal for Council pour une augmentation considérable du taux de connexion sur le système des égouts sanitaires à Plantagenet. The connection rate in Plantagenet is somewhere around $3,500, if I recall correctly, and has not been increased whatsoever, not even for inflation, since 2016. And it's far below what is needed to attack a project of the scale of this expansion. So on March 18th, which was the next meeting of council, on est revenu avec deux propositions. Une proposition que le taux de connexion intérimaire, et je mets l'emphase sur le mot intérimaire, soit augmenté à 20 000 par connexion. C'est une augmentation drastique, mais on fait face à un problème drastique, comme vous savez, de 17 millions de dollars. Et le deuxième élément secondaire, mais d'importance, on a présenté une politique d'allocation pour les 100 unités additionnelles qui ont été accordées par le Conseil. Pas simplement premier arrivé, premier servi, c'était la directive, mais on voulait faire certain que ce soit clair pour tous de la façon dont on va procéder. Et ce qui nous amène à ce soir, which brings us to this evening, which is our first consultation with the developers and the business community. There's going to be other meetings. This is not our first and last one. And we will also be meeting with the residents of Plantagenet that are connected to the system, because any decision that we make will impact them as well. These slides were discussed last February, so I'm not really going to discuss them whatsoever. And I'm simply maybe going to go back one slide, Simon. Just the bottom one in the middle there was a new program that I mentioned that had opened prior to the provincial election. Basically, phase 3 of the Housing Enabling Water System Fund. That was suspended for the duration of the election. We've been in touch with MPP Sarrazin's office to see what's going on with that, and we still don't know when or if and when it's going to be relaunched, but we are following that file very closely. So that's all I will add, and I will pass le micro à Guylaine pour les données démographiques et de zonage.
Je vais rester assise, si ça ne vous dérange pas. Donc, à l'écran, ce que vous voyez, c'est une carte des limites du village de Plantagenet. Puis, tout ce qui est identifié en jaune, c'est les lots vacants qui existent présentement dans les limites du village. Là-dessus, ce n'est pas tous nécessairement des lots destinés à des fins résidentielles, mais on en compte au moins 75. So you can see on the map showing on the screen that all the identified lots in yellow are vacant residential land lots, and they're not all residential lots, sorry. There's 61 of them that are residential. Of that amount, 30 of them could be connected tomorrow morning on an existing sewer pipe that is right in front of the property line. So, donc, 31 de ces lots-là pourraient être construits demain matin, puisqu'un tuyau d'égout sanitaire est directement à la ligne de propriété. Donc, il n'y a aucun travaux à faire pour prolonger ces conduites-là. Tu peux aller à la prochaine slide. On a des cibles de développement à suivre dans les limites d'un village, selon le plan officiel local, puis selon le plan officiel des comtés unis. On regarde à environ 70% du développement qui doit être du développement à faible densité, donc 16 unités par hectare net. On enlève les rues de cette superficie-là. 20% du développement à moyenne densité, donc 30 unités par hectare net, puis 10% du développement à haute densité, au moins 43 unités de logement par hectare net. Avec ces ratios-là, avec le terrain qu'on a présentement de disponible dans le village, on a de la place en masse là, pour implanter tout près de 3000 nouvelles unités de logement. Mais l'étude qui a été faite pour l'expansion de la lagune, ça a été fait pour des terrains qu'on jugeait qui seraient les premiers à être développés. Donc, il y a 42 hectares qui ont été pris en considération. Puis, ces 42 hectares-là, si on regarde les cibles de densité, on pourrait facilement aller chercher 848 unités de logement. Donc, je ne répéterai pas tout en anglais vu que c'est tout sur l'écran comme tel. Prochaine slide, s'il vous plaît. Donc, juste pour faire un petit historique des unités de logement qui ont été créées dans les limites du village de Plantagenet depuis 2011. On regarde, vous les voyez par année, là, on regarde qu'au total, il y a eu 45 nouvelles unités de logement parce qu'il y en a une là-dessus qui a été démolie. So if you look at all the new residential units that were created since 2011 in the village limits, you're looking at 45 new residential units. So it can be fourplexes, it can be a single-family dwelling. We all count them as one unit. So, next slide, please. On est allé chercher les statistiques de population du village de Plantagenet sur Statistique Canada, puis on peut voir que ça varie un petit peu depuis 1991, mais qu'il n'y a pas eu une très grosse augmentation. Là, on parle de même pas 100 personnes de plus depuis 1991. On a même eu une petite baisse là, en 2006, puis après ça, ça a remonté un petit peu. Fait, malgré le fait qu'on a créé des nouvelles unités de logement, il n'y a pas nécessairement beaucoup plus de population, mais on sait tout ce qui se passe. Là. Souvent, les gens habitent seuls ou habitent juste avec un de leurs enfants. Les familles sont moins nombreuses, donc ça prend plus de logements pour loger le même nombre de personnes. La prochaine slide, c'est simplement pour vous illustrer les limites du village de Plantagenet. Ils ont un petit peu changé depuis. On les a refaites en 2022. On a diminué un petit peu la superficie qu'occupait le village de Plantagenet pour pouvoir justifier auprès de la province d'agrandir un petit peu les limites du village de Wendover. On commençait à manquer de terrain à Wendover dans les limites du village. Donc, on a sorti, entre autres, là, c'est surtout les parcelles à l'ouest qui ont été sorties des limites du village pour les mettre rurales. Fait qu'à ce moment-là, ça permettait la création de jusqu'à 3 détachements de terrain sur chacune des parcelles s'ils sont en façade d'un chemin ouvert. Et puis, ça nous laisse, comme je vous dis, amplement d'espace. Là, même en enlevant ces parcelles-là, ça nous laisse assez d'espace pour plus de 3000 unités de logement. Je voulais simplement vous souligner que dans la déclaration provinciale sur la planification, so in the Provincial Planning Statement of 2024, it's stipulated, it's a document that we use to guide our planning principles. So it's written in here that when you develop a village, it should always be, as much as possible, on full services. So it gives you the chance to intensify, and you can develop at a cheaper cost, and there's less spreading of your population. That means cost effective. Dans le plan officiel local, ça dit aussi principalement les mêmes choses. Ça avait été pris de la politique provinciale qui était en place au moment de la rédaction du plan officiel local, que autant que possible, vraiment juste dans des situations très extrêmes, qu'on laisse développer un village sur seulement un service ou pas de service. Quand c'est pas de service, c'est même pas désigné comme étant un urban area. It's going to be designated as being a community area, and that's basically what I wanted to say specify there are special policies in place to force people to connect on services. C'est à peu près ça pour la démographie.
Merci beaucoup, Mme Poirier. On va passer maintenant à M. Gendron. Allez-y, M. Gendron.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Donc, les prochaines slides ici parlent un petit peu plus de la composante engineering du projet. So, a lot of you probably already know, but just to go over the existing system, as we said, it was built in 1974. As per our Ministry of Environment permit, the hydraulic capacity is 561 cubic meters per day. We're currently operating well over that. We just got in the 2024 annual report, and we've been operating at 744, which is 133% of its capacity. Going through the environmental assessment, though, which started in 2022, what we did is we took a 5-year average, which came up to 747. So again, still within that range, operating at 133%. So as part of the EA, we didn't just look at the treatment facility, but looked at the system holistically. Not trying to determine necessarily if local lines could be surcharged or in need of an upgrade, but more looking at the trunks, pumping stations, and the lagoon itself, the treatment facility itself, right? So all that to say that the system, as well as having a facultative lagoon, there is 2 pumping stations, one located more to the south of the village, and the main one close to the lagoon, just east of the river there, pumping up to the lagoon. So as I said, it's a facultative lagoon, so that means that there's little to no treatment being done. Oh, not close enough, fair enough. So there's next to no treatment being done. Really, the reasoning behind that design in the 70s is that winds kind of help with mixing and aeration, and then just before discharging, we add a coagulant that helps with solids, just bring them down to the bottom of the lagoon, and then we discharge twice a year. So very simple system. So it just gives you a bit of perspective on where we've started and where we're going with this. So next slide, please, Simon. Donc, le processus du Environmental Assessment, premièrement, c'est un processus qui est mandatoire sous le Environmental Assessment Act ontarien. Ce n'est pas un processus de design détaillé, ce n'est pas un processus d'estimation des coûts détaillé, c'est un processus de consultation. C'est la première étape de plusieurs étapes dans un gros projet environnemental. Donc, juste pour donner un petit peu de perspective, vous expliquer un petit peu pourquoi on est rendu où ce qu'on en est ici. À la suite d'un environmental assessment, on a besoin de faire une conception, un design détaillé. C'est par la suite qu'on va en construction. Donc, ce que ces consultations nous permettent de faire, c'est de communiquer avec tous les stakeholders, essentiellement les communautés autochtones, tous les ministères en question, ressources naturelles, environnement, les résidents des villages, membres du conseil, puis de s'assurer que tout le monde a une voix essentiellement dans le processus avant qu'on aille en détail en design. Donc, tout ça pour dire, dans le processus du IE, on regarde à toute option possible d'upgrade, essentiellement. Donc, vous allez voir ici qu'on a passé à travers 7 items. On n'ira pas en détail des sous-items, mais vous voyez option 2, admettons, il y a 4 sous-options à l'intérieur de ça. Donc, il y a tout le temps l'option Do Nothing. On a regardé à différentes sortes d'expansions, seulement les lagoons, seulement ajouter un type de traitement pour essayer de sauver des coûts. Mais à la fin de la journée, on doit satisfaire les standards du ministère, basés sur les consultations et les standards. Donc, fort probablement que ce qui allait arriver ici, c'est une amalgamation de plusieurs types de traitements ensemble qui donne la solution préférée. Mais je voulais juste souligner, regardant option 5, on a regardé l'option de bâtir un plan mécanique comme qu'on a à Wendover, qui est extrêmement coûteux, mais a ses avantages aussi, beaucoup de potentiel pour de la croissance. On a même regardé à connecter 2 systèmes ensemble avec l'option 6, qui est de passer de Plantagenet à Wendover. Plusieurs raisons pourquoi que ça n'a pas été l'option préférée. Notamment, il y a une capacité limitée dans ce plan-là. Se rendre 12 ou 15 km au village de Wendover, juste ça, c'est extrêmement coûteux. Puis essentiellement, c'est qu'on surcharge ce système-là, puis on est prêt à upgrader maintenant un plan mécanique qui vaut beaucoup plus cher qu'un lagoon. Puis, option 7, pomper, pump treatment effluent to Ottawa River. Ça, c'était tout simplement de garder qu'est-ce qu'on a en place à Plantagenet, mais de pomper à la rivière d'Ottawa le long de la 9 vers Treadwell, l'exemple. Donc, ce que ça faisait, c'est que ça changeait le receiver, right? Au lieu de décharger dans la Nation, on déchargeait dans la rivière Ottawa. Ça change beaucoup des targets essentiellement de design. Donc, beaucoup plus de lousse en termes de contaminants quand on décharge dans la rivière Ottawa que dans la rivière de la Nation Sud, tout simplement à cause du volume. Prochaine slide, s'il te plaît. Donc, ce qui a été choisi comme solution, or what was chosen here as the preferred solution, essentially, after going through all of those consultations, evaluating all possible solutions, was a mix of everything, essentially, right? So, expanding on the lagoon for storage, but also adding specialized treatment. So there's aeration in there, there's Sager units, so those are gravel bed units that treat for a bunch of stuff, so biological oxygen demand, total suspended solids, so a bunch of those chemicals that you need to treat for. And then there's chemical addition, and then we needed to treat for phosphorus. What we elected to do here essentially is to pay into a program with the South Nation River where instead of treating for phosphorus, which is very, very complicated to do in cold climate in Canada, you can pay into a program with the South Nation River essentially, and they use that money, they pool that money with neighboring municipality to offset essentially or create environmental projects that offset the addition of phosphorus in the system. So it was considerably more cost effective to do that than to try and treat for phosphorus. So that brings us essentially to a system that would double in capacity essentially, allow for 600 new connections. We're talking about 600 residential connections here. ICI, so institutional, industrial, commercial, all of that is baked into this. Just a matter of figuring out how much a business essentially would use in terms of equivalent residential units. So that's kind of the scope of or the capacity of the system, and the preliminary cost estimate is $17 million. So next slide, please. So needed to add as well this slide here. So we just completed the Lefebvre drinking water system master plan. So that's a drinking water system that treats from Lefebvre, feeds the village of Lefebvre, Alfred, Plantagenet, and then Saint-Isidore. It's a rather big system. And so we prepared a master plan to make sure that we were ready to go or prepared essentially or prepared for the upgrades essentially for the next 20 years, right? So make sure that we're not caught off guard by significant expansion. So what came out of that master plan essentially is that in Plantagenet specifically, we're having pressure and fire flow issues. So if we're looking at a big scale development here, we're only getting about 40 liters per second as far as fire flow. The building code warrants 45 liters per second. So just to give a bit of a perspective. So we have low pressure and not a lot of storage essentially because the water tank is in Alfred. So the project here that's being proposed, again, very high level, is some sort of storage and or some pumping to increase that pressure and make sure that we have adequate fire flow. So the preliminary cost estimate for that project is $6.5 million. So that needs to be taken into consideration when we're talking about the upgrade for the lagoon, because significant development will trigger this upgrade as well. And there's a couple of scenarios here that were just very quickly brought forward. Essentially, if it were split 50-50 between what we call the development or growth essentially and the existing users, or if we were to go more of a 25-75 cost share. And that's on a per unit basis, by the way. But the 25-75, essentially, the reasoning behind that is that a significant development would essentially trigger the need for this upgrade. But there is some benefit to the existing residential users as well. So we kind of split it out into two different scenarios here. So next slide, please. And so last one for me here, just kind of bridging the engineering with the financial. If we could give you just a breakdown of how we got to the cost essentially on a per unit basis. So As we said, the existing capacity is 561. We're operating at 747. Again, that's a 5-year average. And so the third row is very important here. So the flow that we're operating above capacity, essentially, that's 745 minus 561 is 186, which would be, in the new upgrade, the portion to be paid, or the portion that benefits the existing users, right? And then new capacity here is 1390, but the added capacity essentially is 829 cubic meters per day. So add all of that up, you can see that the share for the existing users is approximately 22%, and the share for growth is 78%. So that's how we got that breakdown, essentially. And looking over to the right side here, so at 22% versus 78% of the 17 million projects breaks down into, almost just under 4 million and just over 13 million for 500 existing units and 500 growth units. Now, I know that I said that the upgrade, the new upgrade provides for 600 connections. If we were to upgrade the lagoon and have 600 connections tomorrow morning, let's say, then we would be ready for the next upgrade, right? So the way that we're working this out here is that 500 is approximately 80% of the new capacity, and that'll give us some time, essentially, for the next upgrade, right? So that's why we're going from 600 to 500, and going forward with Alex, you'll see that everything is based off of 500 new units. And so last row here is the cost per unit, essentially, both for existing users but for new users. So 7,500 for existing and just over 26,000 for growth on a per connection basis. So that's all for me. I think I'll leave it to Alex for a financial portion.
Merci, M. Gendron. M. Charlebois, si vous allez, allez-y.
Monsieur le maire, donc je vais poursuivre avec la portion financière. Donc, pour enchaîner avec ce que Jonathan vient de parler, si je me concentre premièrement pour les résidents actuellement, donc comme sans tout répéter ce que Jonathan vient de mentionner, mais leur portion des résidents actuels est de 3,8 millions, qu'on a calculé à 22% de la facture totale de 17 millions. Donc, si on divise par le nombre d'unités existants de 500, ça nous donne un frais par unité de 7 500 $ par résident. Donc, si, par exemple, un 4plex serait 3 000 $ pour l'amélioration et l'expansion du nouveau lagoon. Donc, la municipalité, pour ceux qui ne paieraient pas upfront, offrirait des débentures probablement sur une période de 10 ans aux résidents actuels. Donc, ceci donnerait une augmentation de 230 $ par facturation de 3 mois. Donc, on parle de 920 $ par année pendant 10 ans de temps, si on prend compte du frais financier, des intérêts pour l'emprunt. Donc, actuellement, une facture pour le village de Plantagenet, on parle de 1 150 $. Donc, on rajoute ici 900 $, on est au-dessus de 2 000 pendant 10 ans de temps. Rajoute, vous allez voir plus tard, les augmentations importantes dans les premières années pour couvrir les dépenses opérationnelles. Qu'est-ce que Jonathan vient de parler pour les améliorations d'eau qui vont venir. Donc, on parle de des montants assez importants. Donc, pour la municipalité, ça représenterait un emprunt, comme vous voyez là, de 3,8 millions, donc des paiements annuels de 450 000 $ sur 10 ans qui seraient repayés par l'existant. Donc, l'impact au budget pour la portion résident actuelle serait nul pour la municipalité, mais des montants importants tout de même. If I continue now with the new users, so as for the growth now, like Jonathan mentioned again, their portion would be over $13 million, so basically 78% of the bill, which would add a number of 500 new units. So for a connection fee for these new units would be over $26,000, which would be indexed annually. So in year 4, it would be close to over $30,000. This, for the township, this loan represents annual payments of over $700,000 for the next 40 years. So this is a massive, significant loan. And the projection that for the new units that we have identified right now would be close to somewhere between 250 to 300 new users that would contribute right now. So there's just with this information, you can see that there is already a gap of more than 200 units to cover the whole bill of $13 million. So that basically for these 200 units, it's $5.3 million that we need to find somewhere. So as for the rates, if I continue at the next slide here, these are the assumptions for different scenarios. So basically, there is hundreds and thousands of different scenarios, but we'll identify a few scenarios that would be realistic, but at the same time, they're just impossible due to the risk for the township and the amounts. So peut-être, sinon, si tu veux aller à la prochaine slide, c'est la même, mais en anglais. Donc je peux faire, I'll switch French and English. So as for the assumptions, so first, if we would have to go forward right now with the information we have, the user fees would increase for 10% per year for the first 3 years, and then there will be an increase of 5% and now on. Ensuite, for the operation costs of the new lagoon, the expansion, pour les frais d'opération, essentiellement, ça doublerait nos frais d'opération qui passeraient de 135 000 à 275 000 $. Donc, on parle des frais d'utilité, utility fees, contract with Aqua, and repairs and maintenance, things like that. These assumption doesn't include breaks, unforeseen events, donc des imprévus, some future replacements. So sometimes we know it could cost a few $100,000 of breaks and replacements. Like I mentioned earlier, the connection fee would be indexed annually at the same rate as the loan. So for the loan, there is Infrastructure Ontario that offers a program. It's called House Enabling Water Infrastructure. So this loan, basically, they add more years to repay the loan. So the loan ends up to 40 years. But at the same time, this means at the current rate, we would pay more of interest than capital on the loan. So the loan of $17 million would be, well, for the growth, the new user of $13 million would be around $15 million only of interest. So double the payments, the loan. So this loan also is a open loan. So during the construction, we only need to pay interest on what we borrow, and then they have a preferential rate. So basically, it's a prime rate less 20-point base. So right now, this moment with Infrastructure Ontario, the rate is close to 5%. So right now it would be at 4.8%. For the calculation, I've dropped it a little to 4.5%, which is still a high interest. And as last for the assumption, right now in reserve fund, as of January 2025, we have only less than $400,000 in reserve. So this would be pretty much only enough to pay the conception, which is the next phase. It would cost somewhere similar to that. So next slide. Here I focus on a few scenarios. So basically, just to put you more in context, year 1 to 10 would be, we would focus on the construction, and then the connection fees will be just enough to repay the huge amount of loan that we just borrowed. Then year 20 to the next 10 years, year 10 to 20, if the construction slow down, basically the impact would be some pretty significant deficit from year to year. So we gotta embrace it for this period of time. And then year 20 to 30, we hope that the user fee would be high enough to cover all the operating and loan expense. So here's our few scenarios that might be reasonable, but at the same time, for us, they're impossible due to the financial reasons. So even at 15 connection per year for the next 10 years, which is 115 units, we accumulate a deficit of $4 million after 20 years. So it's an average of $200 of deficit over a period of 20 years. Basically the same for 20 connection per year for the next 10 years is also not enough, which adds to 20 units, which we're still in the deficit. So after 20 years in 2045 would still be in the 1 million deficit with an average of about $70,000 of deficit year over year. Again, 15 connection per year for 15 years, so now we're at 225 units. It's still not enough. So 15 connection per year doesn't seem too high, but it's still 5 times the historical rate right now that the construction in Plantagenet. Next slide. So basically, the reason with the impossible scenarios is still with the gap of units we find. So we haven't identified more than 300 units right now. So for improbable but still plausible scenarios, so here we identified few contexts, if you want, that with a mix of everything would be plausible to go forward with the loan, with the expansion. So the magic number, if one, the breaking point would be 30 connection per year for 10 years. So 10 times the current rate right now. Also, interest rates would need to fall a bit below 5%. So every 0.5% of interest rate is basically $50,000 of annual payment. Then right now, the risk is really on our shoulder, on the township shoulder. So even with these numbers, if at one point construction slowed down or whatsoever, it means it's just deficit after deficit for all the township. Well, yeah, we can't assume this much of a risk. So there would need a non-refundable risk, at least at 50% from the builder. So we need to collect at least over $3 million from the builder just to share a bit this financial risk of this huge investment. And finally, we basically need a grant of over 50% of the cost. So any grant that's available, we'll look for it. And if we have the approval of a grant, right, then we'll have more assumption and scenario that would be presented with actually numbers that make more sense for everyone. That will basically, we can lower the connection per year or lower the rates per year, the connection fees. So this sums up pretty much the financial aspect of this project.
Merci, M. Charlebois. Est-ce que somebody else wants to add something? Mr. Potvin?
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Donc, il y a juste two last slides quickly. So, les constats, the findings is essentially, not surprisingly, the financial risk is simply too high for the municipality to consider a $17 million project on its own. The risk has to be shared by the ones that would benefit. We understand it's a big ask, but for us to be in a comfortable position to make a favorable recommendation to council, we would need to basically have a commitment and prepaid fees around the sum of $3 million to share the financial burden. And even with that commitment from builders, we still would require a government subsidy at around 50% of the cost. So basically, it's not a peachy, rosy situation, but you can understand with 500 users and a $17 million price tag, we have to share the risk, and the township is not in a position to take on that gamble by itself. For the next steps, Basically, three items have been identified. We will be holding a public consultation like this one with the residents and the users of Plantagenet that are currently connected to the sanitary system. Également, on fera rapport au Conseil avec certaines recommandations à la suite de vos commentaires que nous recevons ce soir et ceux de la population de Plantagenet. Et évidemment, for this project to move forward as indicated, there will be some ongoing political canvassing both at the provincial and the federal level. In very, very simple terms, this project simply cannot proceed without financial assistance from either the provincial or the federal level at least 50% of the cost of this project. So moving forward, we did have a question period. I'm sure you have many questions. Il y a un micro à la salle, où il va y avoir un micro. Simplement, vous avancez, donnez votre nom et puis votre question à qui elle s'adresse. Any questions, just step up to the mic, state your name and state your question.
Puis si je peux ajouter, il n'y a pas de mauvaises questions. Là. There's no bad questions, so make sure you ask all the questions tonight.
English, I guess, yes. I just want to make a few comments, so, and I can share this with you guys afterwards with all the paperwork and underwriting and stuff, but I did an appraisal for a 6-unit building, the same building in Rockland, the same building in Alfred Plantagenet. Now, the cost of the Rockland development went up. It was supposed to go up.
Excuse me, sir, can we have your name just for the record?
Felix Oliver Lachaume.
Okay.
And yes, so essentially the development charges went up to $59,000 for a single unit dwelling in Rockland. And now we would be putting ours up here. The way Rockland is structured is that the DC charges include the sewer and the waterworks. So when we're building multi-residential units, we can access the accessory dwellings like free. So we have, like, let's say I'm building 2 triplexes next to each other. I would only pay, what they suggested is $59,000, but it actually came down. I received the email, it's now $52,000. So I'd pay $52,000 on one side, $52,000 on the other side, a total of $104,000 for development charges, including the sewers. And I would then have my basement units free of development charges. So I'd have a 6-unit building for $104,000. Here now, I had previously done the calculations with $20,000 connection, but if I read correctly, it would now be $26,000 if we do a 25/75. So for the same building, it would now be $198,000 to build it here in Plantagenet. The appraisal itself, it's the same exact building. It's the one I'm building on Chantilly Road, actually. The building was evaluated at $1.48 million in Rockland, and the same exact building was evaluated at $1.7 in Alfred Plantagenet. The reason is because the cap rates for the banks, they give us like 5.75 around here and 5.25 in Rockland, because Rockland is closer to Ottawa. So for the same exact building, the land was $100,000 more in Rockland. So, but there's a $140,000 difference in value, and that I have it on paper. So there's already a $40,000 incentive for me to build in Rockland. I know I'm not saying this because I'm not building Plantagenet, but there's already $40,000, and now with the new price increase for the permit, there's going to be around $130,000 incentive to build it in Rockland rather than building it in Plantagenet. So I don't know about the amount part. Maybe we figure something else, or so. What really scares me is that if we all want it, we all want the city, we're okay with paying more, but if we don't get the volume of developers in the area, I don't think we're going to get a grant, to be honest. Like, Stéphane Sarrazin mentioned that for us to get a grant, we have to be like very active. I don't even know if 10, 15 connections a year will attract and I know you guys don't know either, so that's one thing that I wanted to share with you guys. And the last thing, I know we got a budget for the lagoon, but we have to put some thought in the fact that it said plus or minus 30%. Minus 30% of $17 million right there is a few million bucks. Now, even with grants and those types of connections, I'm not sure if maybe it would be worth it to like hire people in-house. At that price, maybe we could buy a sand pit or something and do it ourselves. Because if we're able to get the price of the construction down, I think that would like, if we could shave off 30%, we're 30% of 26,000 now is we're in the 18,000, 17,000. We're starting to be more competitive. So I think before scaring people off with those high numbers and saying no, we should maybe try and get some real quotes done to see how much it would actually cost to build. Or after when we receive that, maybe just do it in-house. I mean, if you don't have money to build a new house, you renovate yours, and if you don't have money to hire, you do it yourself. So maybe hire a few more travaux publics, and I don't know. It's just a suggestion. So thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que M. Gendron voulait répondre à ça ou est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui veut adresser ça? Non? OK. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions, d'autres commentaires? Gênez-vous pas, c'est le temps de... Go ahead, sir.
Sean Sicard. I know attending the meeting last week, I think it was last week, where we talked about the 20,000 fee, and now it's a little bit higher. One of the questions that Mr. Walker brought up, which I thought was really relevant, was I know that we're one township, but we're not treating, we amalgamated for a reason, I'm supposing, right? So the development fees there in Wendover, would they, or L'Orignal or what have you, would they start to get balanced out? Because I only, like, if you have 26,000 in one spot and, I don't know, 10,000 in another, it kind of makes sense that you'd kind of try to equal those out, with at least within your own township. It's one thing to compete against Rockland, and we don't have any control over some of the other townships. But within our own township, if we average that number out, first of all, it seems to make a lot of sense to me. There would be no competition within our own township. But on top of that, I do think, you know, the point was made last week that you could elevate your pool, because eventually they're going to have some issues in some of these other townships, or some of these other towns, right, that are going to require funding again. And so I think it behooves us to bring that up if we can. And while the do-nothing thing seems almost obvious now, like where we're kind of stuck, the second comment or question I would have is the AMP report that's on file is really clearly showing that we have a deficit. And, you know, I can tell you from personal experience recently, you know, rural development is really, really discouraged, to the point almost like there's a campaign against it. But yet the only place we can develop and expand easily here is in one area, which is in Wendover. So I don't know how we're not going to keep falling behind here on our taxation issue, because there's inflationary issues that come up every day that we need to address. And the only way to do that is either to cut your services down, raise taxes, or raise revenue. And raising taxes is never popular, and, you know, but I'm not sure what else you're going to have to do at some level. So that's my concern, is that at some point you're going to be facing the music and say we have to do a large tax increase because we can't expand our current revenue model any higher. And I think, in fairness, like, I've been in this township for, you know, a long time now. You can see it starting to really start to catch up to us, right? The garbage is shrinking and the user fees are going. As a commercial property, we pay taxes, but we don't get any more garbage service that we don't have to pay for. So it's going in the wrong way, and I understand you guys are just trying to figure this out too, so I don't think this is a shot. It's more like, what is the plan to raise revenue if we can't do that? Like, what is the plan to raise revenue? If we can't expand, how do we get more money? Because the only other option I see, unless I'm wrong, is taxation. So if we even it out, maybe it might help. Just a thought.
Thank you, sir. So anyone wants to address this? No? Any more questions? Allez-y, M. Potvin. Allez-y.
Well, Thank you very much for the question, Sean, and you're absolutely right. We are catching up after nearly 30 years. It was a forced marriage back in 97. Every village wanted to keep its own infrastructure. It costs a lot of money to run. That's one part of the issue. With respect to standardizing fees across the township, we just did that last year with a water and wastewater study that was done by Watson's. If you turned on your tap in Wendover, in Alfred, in Plantagenet, or Lefebvre, you were paying different fees, which made no sense to us. It was also a nightmare for the administration to keep track of all those different fees. So that's being done. All those rates are being harmonized, and by year 5, everybody's going to be paying the same rate across the township. So that's number one. Number two, relating to the same question, we do have a user pay system in Alfred Plantagenet. So it's not the 10,000 residents that pay for the sewer upgrade in Plantagenet. It is the residents of Plantagenet. Just like 20 years ago, Wendover paid for its upgrade for the water system, and we have some of the highest rates in Eastern Ontario, if not in Ontario and Wendover. So that's the downfall of a user-payer system, but that's what we have. With respect to the asset management plan, you're absolutely right. Those have been mandatory for years, and it's probably in the last 5 years or so that we're actually taking this, I won't say seriously, but we're actually committing funds towards it. And no, tax increases are never fun. This year in 2025, 6.34,
6.8.
6.8, but we're still the second lowest in Prescott and Russell. And of that 6.8, 1.6 is directly allocated towards the asset management plan, which I believe is the amount we were told to put into the plan for the next 15 years just to stay on top of things. Not catching up, stay on top of things. So is there a lot of work ahead of us? Absolutely. I'll leave it at that. I think I addressed both your points.
Merci, M. Potvin. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui aurait des questions? Madame, je voulais dire votre nom, madame, s'il vous plaît.
Je pense que vous le savez tout, Chantal Galipo.
Oui, c'est juste pour le record.
Oui. Moi, ma question est, quand on a agrandi le lagoon de Wendover, il fallait so much de maisons ou d'unités bâties par année pour couvrir les dépenses. Est-ce qu'on les a toujours couverts?
Je pense qu'on les a. Vous voulez répondre à ça, Madame Poirier?
Si je ne me trompe pas, il y a peut-être des années qu'il y a eu un petit peu moins d'unités que nécessaire pour couvrir l'emprunt, mais il y avait des meilleures années, donc on arrivait à mettre de l'argent de côté pour les années qui étaient moins bonnes. Mais depuis un certain temps, on les couvre amplement, là. Mais si je ne me trompe pas, je pense que c'était 28 unités qui étaient nécessaires par année pour couvrir un prêt sur 40 ans.
Merci pour la réponse.
D'autres questions dans le public? Any more questions? OK, monsieur.
Marc Boucher.
Go ahead.
Je vous entends parler depuis tantôt là, des dépenses, comment ça va coûter et tout ça, mais il n'y a pas personne qui parle des revenus que ça va amener. La salle ici, s'il y a plus de payeurs de taxes, mais ça va diminuer les coûts, il y a la pelouse, les parcs. S'il y a plus de payeurs de taxes, avez-vous pris ça en considération aussi? Je sais qu'en affaires, il n'y a pas juste aller couper, c'est où c'est que tu peux faire plus d'argent. Puis je pense que des revenus de taxes, c'est du cash for life.
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui veut répondre à ça? Monsieur.
Oui, merci, Monsieur Boucher. Peut-être juste certains points ici que j'aimerais comme soulever. Le fait que c'est pas comme toute la population d'Alfred Plantagenet qui contribue comme au lagoon, le fait que le nombre est vraiment limité fait en sorte, ultimement, ça revient quand même à une décision des conseillers, mais on ne peut pas prendre comme les taxes pour aller payer la facture du lagoon en tant que tel. Il faut que ça soit vraiment payé à partir des user fees. Présentement, avec notre petit bassin à Plantagenet de user fee, on récolte 260 000 par année de frais d'usager. C'est juste à peine, on couvre plus que nos dépenses actuelles, mais avec des investissements importants, c'est là que tu vois que on ne peut pas supporter ce type d'investissement sans avoir une subvention importante ou vraiment comme l'appui, avoir l'assurance de comme un certain minimum de connexions par année qui est assez élevé. Puis c'est ça pour qu'est-ce qu'il y en a en réserve, fonds de réserve. C'est déjà attribué à certains projets attitrés. Par exemple, le parc industriel à Wendover, on va aller prendre de la réserve d'égout de Wendover pour couvrir certaines dépenses. Après ça, il y a des emprunts internes qui se font pour l'achat de camions. On a basically 3 grosses fonds de réserve. Fait qu'il y a aussi l'eau à Wendover qui, leur tour va venir plus tôt que plus tard, je crois. Puis c'est pour financer aussi des montants à l'interne, comme les camions bennes à 400 000 à cette heure qu'on peut quasiment plus se permettre de payer avec notre base de taxes qu'on va emprunter dans nos propres réserves. C'est le fonds de réserve de l'égout à Alfred, qui contient en ce moment 2,5 millions. Mais comme je dis, leur tour, avec toutes les études qu'on fait, leur tour va venir. À Plantagenet, c'est à la population de Plantagenet veut pas de payer leurs factures et non nécessairement aux citoyens d'Alfred. Ultimement, la décision reviendrait quand même au conseiller. C'est s'ils décident d'attribuer l'argent à Plantagenet, mais quand le tour d'Alfred viendrait, il y aura à ce moment-là, Plantagenet ne sera pas encore en mesure de générer assez de surplus pour dire repayer le bill Alfred, si tu veux, en bon terme.
Les 100 capacités d'égout qu'on avait dans la dernière réunion, est-ce qu'on va encore les avoir ou c'est plus ça?
Je laisserai quelqu'un d'autre répondre à cette question. Ça vous dérange pas.
Monsieur Potvin?
Ce que le Conseil a dit, c'est oui, il y avait 100 capacités additionnelles. Ce que l'administration apporte. Par contre, il y avait un caveat d'attacher un astérisque. Ça disait qu'il faut par contre augmenter considérablement le frais de connexion. Est-ce que ça va être 20 000? Est-ce que ça va être moins? Ça va être une décision pour le Conseil à la prochaine rencontre. Et en deuxième lieu, on a apporté également un mécanisme d'allocation pour ces unités-là, pour faire certain qu'on ne perd pas le contrôle, puis qu'on a 100 allocations de plus et pas 200.
Ces fonds-là vont aller dans la réserve pour...
Absolument. C'est l'intention de facturer plus pour pouvoir justement se monter une réserve lorsque viendra le temps de faire la dépense capitale.
OK, merci.
Merci, M. Boucher. Allez-y, M. Sicard.
As I'm sitting here, I have to say, I totally get the position we're in. Like, just to be clear, I totally get that. Having said that, I almost feel like we're kind of trapped in our own ball of rules here as a society. And I'll give you an example. My cousin lives in Projet, and he lives in a subdivision in Projet, and he has no septic, he has no city-provided sewer in his region. And everybody's like this. And he has an eco-flow in his particular area. So I guess knowing that we need revenue, and it sounds like we're decades away from potentially getting anything else, is there any flexibility, and regardless, no offense, Guylaine, of what you put up there, which again is a man-made rule that we can take off? Like, we have a responsibility here to grow this area, to bring revenue up, so we're not taxing. Why would we sit on a rule that says that there's this, we want to encourage, and should be like this? Yes, in an ideal way, we should be having maybe hooked up. But if you can't provide the service, you're getting in front of actual living and progress. And it's a little bit aggravating, if I'm honest, because it's almost like can't do this, but I don't understand why we can't do this. They do it in Bourget, and that's a Rockland Township. There's no issues there. So the cost of that is probably about 30 grand, 35,000. You guys don't have to service it. You don't have to worry about pumping it. I do not understand why we're not doing outside the box thinking like that, which is not really that outside the box considering where you live, I believe, they actually do this. No offense. So they do it there. Why not that option as one? Number two would be, and we've talked about this briefly before, is if it's okay to pump this stuff in the Ottawa River but not pump it into the Nation River, then get the Brazo trucks and pump it into the Ottawa River and set up a system that's doing that. But one or the other has to move, right? Like, I'm fighting right now with the counties of Prescott-Russell. Fighting. And I mean, I could show you the emails, and it's ridiculous. It's basically, how many ways can I discourage you from doing a project? Because, the city plan says this. And so, like, the last comment back was, well, have you consulted engineering for your complex project, blah, 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 and are you considered this, and more? I'm a taxpayer here, and more tells me I don't even want to deal with your stuff. And in fairness, we have to live somewhere. Can't live in the country, that's the urban planning kind of mantra. Can't live in the city because we can't afford it. Can't actually develop on all this land here where the cows are pooping every day because at the end of the day, we won't allow septic systems to go in place. Can you give me one good reason? Because health doesn't seem to be a problem in Projet. Can you give me one good reason why we wouldn't accept that, take the revenue, let the developers put them in, and now with an EcoFlow system, you can get them in quite tight, quite small. I have one at the cottage at Lac Simon. It's right on the water, and they allow it there. So I don't understand like why we can't just axe that rule, because we're not going to get the funding, 17 million, anytime soon. So this would allow us to grow and to flourish, and I don't see the problem standing in front of it except for man-made rules.
Merci, M. Sicard. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut adresser le commentaire? M. Gendron.
Thanks, Mr. Sicard. Can't speak to the planning portion of this that was explained in the report or in the presentation. From an engineering perspective, what I would say is that private service development is quite different from what we have in the village here currently and the types of lots that we have, right? Obviously, being municipally serviced allows for much higher densities than having. So you spoke about Projet, right? There are the majority of the development there is 3/4 to an acre lots, right? So very different, a lot less dense, takes up a lot of space in your quote unquote prime area where you would want the more users on that very expensive service or system that we just talked about today. So from an engineering perspective, that's what I would say. The more the merrier on a very expensive service. Every single lot that you develop that is not on that service is money lost to contribute to that system, right? So that's kind of where I would leave it.
Nothing right now, John. Zero. And from what I can tell, for 10, 15 years, you're still going to get nothing. So that's like saying I'm going to save this all for one day when my children might need it. Maybe. Like, logically, there's nothing wrong with an EcoFlow system, and you can fit the whole system in the size of this corner here.
Yeah, I think it's not an environmental argument that I'm making. It's more of, you know.
From a space perspective, if that's the contributing issue, if that's the reason that we don't want to do it, like we're going to save for later. No offense, that's the same as getting this township, this Russell County argument back, is saying we want to encourage it to go there. Well, first of all, encouraging is great, but if you can't provide the services for people to actually get on, then you're basically saying you're stuck. Go to Ottawa. Go to place. And with due respect, I grew up in the country. I don't want to be hustled into a Wendover type of project. Maybe some people like that, but I don't, my kids don't, and other people don't. So I think there needs to be flexibility here, because I'm not sure it's much different than when the Indigenous were said, go live on a reserve. I don't want to live in the city. So in terms of here, all these fields here, maybe we won't get the high density, but we're 1,000 people. We need to grow. The builders need to work. People need to thrive, and especially these days with housing crisis and I'll say a trade war. I think we got to just be a little bit more flexible on some of these issues, as opposed to saying we're going to save it for the day we might get there. And that's great, but if you can't provide the service, someone's got to step up here and just do what needs to be done. And I'm not blaming you, because you had 17 million. I know you designed a big button system, right? I get that, but we don't have it here collectively. You guys are the councilors, you guys are the managers. We don't have the money. Look at the numbers. There's no way we're going to be able to burden like the developers are not going to step up to that degree. We're not going to have that type of burden. So the plan is what now? That's all I'm saying. If there is a plan to say maybe it's half a million dollars we want, instead of 2,000, it's 1,000. Nice big yards. It's like Rockwood Park of the future here. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. It would be nice to have half-acre, 3-acre lots there. Service property, people would manage their lawns, etc. I don't see the downsides there personally, John. That's all. I know from a planning agent perspective and the perfection of optimizing the amount of space. We live in a couple of facts here. We live in 9.8 million square kilometers in Canada. In Ontario, 84% of it is Crown owned. So that means only like a small percentage that's owned by actual people, and yet we tell people what they can and cannot do so much with that small amount. It's not like we're not preserving space. We have Check, check. We have 84% reserved for future generations, right, in Crown land. But the current generation actually has to live, thrive, build, survive. So with respect, and I know, again, this is not a blame game. I know you guys are just kind of walking through what the normal process would be, but we need something. Like if that's not the case, then I would say, then amalgamate with the City of Ottawa and ask for help there because they have a bigger pool of money. Like maybe it's time to just say to hell with it. We're all going to be amalgamated. At least then projects will be able to continue. Because with respect, I've been driving to town back and forth for 30 years here. You can't drive to town anymore. We need PICOMs of the world and other industries of the world here because you cannot, there's no infrastructure left. They closed Highway 17. Don't ask me what Brainiac did that without having a second route to get into Ottawa for all these people. But no one looked at transportation needs or anything else for all the people that lived out here. They just let it. Now, when you go into town, it's packed. You pretty much Wendover, you're in line. You get your coffee, good thing, because you're stuck in line, snaking all the way up and all the way back, which means we have an obligation here to develop. And if we can't pay for it ourselves, either let's get married to a big brother that can pay for it, and if not, then I'd say we have to, and I look at the councillors, we got to be brave here a little bit to stand up to counties of Prescott-Russell a bit, and to say, listen, I know you have a planning, but we have a crisis here in our area. We can't afford it. We're not getting the tax dollars. We're going to have to be outside the box here a bit and say, we need to make some decisions here that's best for our unified township. Not Wendover, our unified township. That's all. Like, push back a bit. I think everybody here would agree that we're behind you guys to push back a bit. So I don't mind man-made rules until they get in the way of common sense. And then it's like, I don't see why we have them.
Thank you, Mr. Scar. Anybody wants to add anything? Go ahead, sir. So the only thing I can add is that we're here to listen to you guys. So hopefully.
Thank you. My name is Ian Walker. I'd like to make comments on the, I'd like to thank the administration for the very complete job of Plantagenet. It's a good job. What is missing in the job, the project, is, as has been brought up already, this township, I believe, needs to become unified, and everything that happens in Plantagenet should be happening in the rest of the township. And the sooner that we're unified, the sooner that we will be able to advance and get the money together to do this kind of project. Right now, we're still, this presentation today was still very much a Plantagenet issue. I was under the impression that we solved the problem of making it a unified thing, and we did with, we're gonna, in 5 years, everybody's gonna be paying the same thing. But in the meantime, we need to be unified, and everything that happens in Plantagenet has to happen in Wendover and every other, and Alfred, etc. Every time we make a connection, everything. We have to be unified, just like Ottawa, just like, as far as I know, most of the rest of Ontario. And I've said this already, and I'm just saying it again, and I appreciate Mr. Sicard and Mr. Lachaume bringing up these items, but we have to be unified. That's all I can say, really, is the sooner that we're unified, the sooner we can come up with the money to finance this. What this project shows me right now is it's really hard for Plantagenet to go ahead once again. And the other thing I just wanted to point out to the people in the room, it was just brought up to our attention at the last meeting that Wendover is also now going to be full with the new 400 units we just gave out, or 300 units we just gave out. Alfred is on its way to being full. The sooner we come up with this demonstration of how to fix Plantagenet, it will also fix everything. I can say that the way the township is being run right now, we are not sustainable. It is impossible for this township to be continuing the way it's doing right now for even the next 10 years. 20 years, for sure not, but even the next 10 years. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I know that we're here to listen to all them people tonight, and the council's going to make a decision at one point there. So, anybody else wants to add anything? Y a-t-il quelqu'un qui veut? Allez-y, monsieur. Veuillez dire votre nom, s'il vous plaît.
Paul Gore. I'm just wondering, what kind of grants have you guys applied for, and what the requirements are for those grants, and have we been refused any of those grants?
Thank you, Monsieur Gore. Monsieur Potvin.
Since we've started the, thank you for the question, Mr. Gould. Since we started the EA process, we've applied to 2 different grants that the province issued specifically for water infrastructure, the Housing Enabling Water System Fund. Phase 1, we applied, we were denied. Phase 2, we applied, we were denied. And there's supposed to be a Phase 3 coming out, which is going to be focused again on water, but health and safety. So we're hoping that a lagoon that's overflowing will meet the threshold, although there is less money in that pot that was promised prior to the election than the first two programs. So we receive all the emails of all the grants, whether it's federal or whether it's provincial. If there's anything that even is remotely possible, we apply. It's as simple as that. But there's not a ton of there. And to be quite honest, we're not the only municipality in this boat. There's a municipal infrastructure deficit across the province. There's tons of literature on it. We are catching up. But to answer your question, yes, we are applying, and so far we're 2 out of 2 rejected.
Merci, M. Potvin. Est-ce que ça répond à votre question, monsieur? S'il n'y a pas d'autres questions, on a un petit lunch ici, là, vous êtes intéressés, puis il y a même des rafraîchissements en arrière. Là. Fait que je vais passer à la clôture de la réunion, que je déclare 8h16 terminée. Fait que on vous invite à continuer à jaser if you want to pick up later on. So you're welcome.